Hi everyone, it's Lynn Dion here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I've got a fun Tim Holtz project to show you for Valentine's Day. So let's go ahead and get started. So to create this chocolate candy box, we're going to be using the Tim Holtz Sizzix Colorize die set called True Love. And those pieces to the right, the heart-shaped pieces, are going to create the box. And then these little pieces here are going to create the wrapper. So these two pieces for each of these shapes. And there's a heart, a square, a circle, and a rectangle shape. So it's clearly marked on the back. These are items number 1 and 4. And I'll show you that here in a second. And then the pieces that are left over are going to create the candy. And these little dies at the bottom will create all of those little decorative items for the top of the candy. And there is one for each of the shapes. So you have one for the heart shapes, one for the circle, one for the square, and one for the rectangle. And it's clearly marked on the back which ones are which. But you could certainly mix and match those if you want to. So now I've got the two pieces that create the wrapper. And for paper, I'm using the Kraft-Stock Tim Holtz Idea-ology. And this is the metallics collection. These are the metallic classics. So I grabbed that gold color, and this is a nice heavyweight cardstock. So I'm going to die cut the pieces I need for each of the wrappers, and you can see those here. I went ahead and die cut those off camera, but here's where I wanted to show you. On the back, it's clearly marked heart shape 1 and heart shape 4. And then here are the other two. These are the square 1 and the square 4, and so on. So you need 1 and 4 to create the little wrapper for your candies. So I've got some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I'm going to apply a little bit of glue on these, and then I'll go ahead and attach these. And it's clearly marked on each of these where that little top piece needs to go. It's embossed right into the design, so you'll know exactly where to place your items. So let's go ahead and do this next one. Again, just a little bit of glue. You can brush away any excess with your finger, and then I'm lining it up with the embossed area on that other piece. And you can take a closer look at that. So I'll do that for the rest of these. And once I have those all put together, we can set those aside and we'll start working on the candy. So now I'm going to grab those other two dies. So that would be dies 2 and 3 for each of the shapes. And again, those are clearly marked on the back. And I went ahead and die cut a variety of brown colors of paper, of cardstock. And I'll show you those in a second. I'll show you which ones I use so you'll know exactly what I did here. And then I also will show you the papers I use for the little icing on top of all the candies. So I've grabbed 3 different ink pads here. I've got black soot, gathered twigs, and walnut stain. And I'm using a small blending brush, and I'm just going to add a little shadow around the edges of these candies, just to give a little highlight there. And I'll just switch out the color of ink I'm using depending on the paper. So for some of these, I'll use the lighter brown color, and then on some of them, I'll use that darker brown. And then for these really dark ones, I'm going to use the black soot. And I'm just using that smaller brush because it just will not completely cover the item. I just want to go around the edges. So now let's go ahead, and here I'll show you now which items we're working with for these dies. So there you can see it's shape 2 and 3. So we used 1 and 4 for the wrappers, and we'll use 2 and 3 for the candies. So now we can go ahead and glue these together, and you can make these any color you want them to be. So your candies could be white chocolate, dark chocolate, just a regular milk chocolate, so whatever you want. I just kind of mix these up so I'd have a variety of colors, but whatever you choose to do here will be fine. And I've just gone ahead and I'll layer these up. And again, it's clearly marked. There's an embossed marking on each of those so you know exactly where to place everything. And now I can go ahead and put the candies in the candy wrappers. And I just thought this gold foil would be so pretty and so elegant. And we're going to repeat that gold on the box top. And we're also going to be embossing it, so it's going to be a really pretty box top. So again, I just wanted to show you how easy those are to line up. They just drop right into place. And now we have all of our little candies completed, and I did a whole bunch off camera. I die cut several of these, but I just wanted to show you one of each of the shapes. And now I'm grabbing the little decorative dies for the top of these. And again, there's one set for each of your shapes. And those are clearly marked on the back of the dies. And now you can see how these come together by using all of those little decorative toppers that are die cut. And for this one, I'll just go ahead and glue this piece on. And I think these little decorations just add so much to these candies. They're just so cute. So then for the heart-shaped one, I'll quickly show you some of the little decorative pieces that I used. So I've got that one with the little heart and then the little swirls. And then that one there, what happens is you can see here it die cuts several sizes of the shapes. So you can kind of mix and match those heart shapes that you get from this one. So I'm just going to use that larger piece. And then I'll just use that tiny heart in the center, and I'll just save those other pieces for another project. And then for this next one, we've got that pretty swirl. We've got a little bit different shape of a swirl. And then we've got this kind of zigzaggy one. And then there's that little tiny heart as well, so I'll go ahead and pop that one on this last candy. And then for this square shape, I've got that little zigzag, I've got another one, and then for this last candy, I'm just going to add that little swirl around the edges. And then I'll add a little heart right in the center of that one. So all of these little pieces come in each of these little dies. So now what I want to do is show you what papers I used. I used the Lawn Fawn cardstock for all of these. I used Ballet slippers, then I used the raspberry, and I also used the guava. And for the browns, I used ground coffee, the paper bag, and the Kraft cardstock. Now I'm going to add some glaze to the decorative toppings on these candies, and I'm using my Nuvo Crystal Glaze. This is just a clear glaze, and I'm going to apply it just where that decorative area is. I do like to test the glaze on some scrap paper first just to make sure there's no bubbles in there. So just give it a squeeze onto your scrap paper and then you're good to go to your project. So you can see that it's a little bit cloudy right now, but when it dries, it will dry crystal clear. So I did that for all of these. The next thing I want to add is a little rock candy glitter, again from the Tim Holtz collection. And I've got my Nuvo craft spoon. This is a double-ended spoon. And I'm just going to add just a little tiny glitter to each of these while they're still wet. Now let's go ahead and create the box. I've got the Lawn Fawn Vanilla Malt cardstock, and all of these cardstocks from Lawn Fawn are 100 pounds. And then I'm going back to that metallic classics that we used before, and I'll grab that gold. So you need to die cut 2 of that largest solid heart, 1 out of the gold and 1 out of the vanilla malt. And then I'm going to show you here, that's how this is going to get layered up. But first, let's add a little bit of shadowing to this. I've got the Tim Holtz Antique Linen Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to go around the edges of the large heart. And this will create a little shadow for the inside of the box. And then for the second heart that's going to layer on top of that, I'm going to apply the ink from the inside out. So I want that shadow to be on the inside of this heart. So I'm just kind of pressing the ink down onto my craft mat and then pushing it up onto that heart. And then for this last piece, I'm going to add a little bit of ink, or I'm sorry, for this third piece, I'm going to add a little bit of ink down here at the base. I do come back in a little bit later and add a bit more shadowing to that one. So you kind of want to look at it, see if it looks like it's dimensional. And here's where you can see I did decide to add a bit more shadowing to this piece. And now we can go ahead and glue these together. And again, they're clearly marked as to where you need to line these up. And by adding that bit of shadowing, you do get a little bit more of a three-dimensional looking box. So I think it's worth taking the time to add a little bit of shadowing to these. Then I'll add this last thin piece and just kind of spread out that glue a little bit and then pop that into place. Gold piece that's going to be the top of our box, I thought it would be fun to add a little bit of embossing to that. You know when you get those really pretty boxes of chocolate, that top is embossed? So let's go ahead and use the Tim Holtz Textured Impressions. This is called Swirls. So I'm going to pop that in the embossing folder, and I'm trying to line it up with that pretty swirl right there. And then I like to run my 3D embossing folders through with a couple of pieces of cardboard through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. It's too tight, make sure you back it out and just use one piece of cardboard or a couple of pieces of cardstock. You don't want it to be too tight as you're running it through, and you should use the directions for your specific machine. Go ahead and create the bow for the front of our candy box. And this is from the Tim Holtz Sizzix Thinlits Bowtied Colorize collection. And you want to die cut all of the pieces, and they are clearly labeled on the back as to the colors that you need. So that first one said red 1, red 2, and this one is red 3. So you know exactly what colors to use, and these are labeled as well. So all of your little pieces are labeled for your colors. So you can go ahead and die cut those. And then I'm just going back to my Nouveau Deluxe adhesive, and we'll go ahead and glue these together. So you just want to follow the little shape patterns that are embossed onto the cardstock when you run them through. And again, it's clearly marked where these need to go. And these different colors will create the little shadows that you need. Now don't worry here that these colors are kind of bright. We're going to be adding some ink and some Foundry wax to these a little bit later on. So we're going to give this bow an antique look. But let's just start off with these colors. These are the same colors I used to create the little toppers for the candy. Now, although I did put this together, I didn't end up using these pieces, and you would need 2 of those if you want to create a complete ribbon for around your box. So I'm going to set that aside and just use the bow and the 2 little tassels there. So let's go ahead and place the bow on our box top, and I'm going to just kind of figure out exactly where I want to place these. And then I'll glue these 2 tassels down, and then for the bow I'm going to put some glue in the center and then a little bit of Kraft 3D foam tape on each of the sides just to give it a little bit of dimension. So let's grab some pattern papers for our background, and I've got these 2 sheets here. That one is going to come from the worn wallpaper scraps from the Tim Holtz Idea-ology collection, and you can see it kind of has that wallpaper texture to it. And this contains all of these pieces. You get these die cuts and all of these pattern papers. And then for this second pattern paper, this is going to come from the Backdrops collection. This again is from the Idea-ology collection, and you get all of these beautiful double-sided papers in this collection as well. So I purchased that little frame there at my local craft store, and I'll show you that here in a second again. And the inside of the frame measures about 7 by 7. So I'm just going to cut this paper down to 7 inches. And then along this edge, I'm just going to tear, and I'm going back and forth in order to get that really pretty ruffled edge. Once I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and use my gathered twigs ink and add a little bit of ink around the edges, and I'm using a little bit larger blending brush just to make sure I get a nice coating of that ink all the way around, and that you'll see will sit right inside our frame. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this piece as well. I've got some 1/4 inch double-sided tape. I want to make sure that I adhere this really well, and this is nice and strong. So I'm going to place plenty of it along the back, and then I'm going to go ahead and attach this. And then I'll do the same thing for this other little strip on the left-hand side. Now I do want to mention that all of the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below and also on my blog. The only thing I haven't listed is that little frame, because again, I just purchased that at my local craft store. So now I've gone back to that paper pack that we used before, and I'm going to grab one of those little die cuts, and I thought this little doily was just so pretty. I've added a little ink around the edges, and now I've got the Tim Holtz layers. This again is from the Idea-ology collection, and I'm going to add a little bit of ink to this little corner cluster of flowers that I found in that collection. There's 2 of them, so I'm going to use one on the top left and one on the bottom right. And then there's a nice collection of butterflies in there, in that pack. And I'm going to add a little ink to these 3 butterflies. Now I did add a little tiny ink to these ribbons and bows. I just want to, again, antique this a little bit, but we're going to be adding some gilding to this. So again, we're just kind of starting to do a little antiquing on these. So I'll position these in this inside my frame. I can go ahead and glue down the base, but first let's tuck that little doily in there. And this frame was an unfinished frame, so I just painted it. I sanded it, and then I painted it with a little bit of oyster beige acrylic paint. Now let's add the candies. So I just took a little time there to kind of place those around, and I wanted it to look nice and full, so I've got plenty of them in there. Got some on top of the others. And then once I had that in place, I just started gluing them down. And I did pop up a couple of those. Now I've got my 3D foam tape. I'm doubling that up, and I'll use that double layer of tape up on the top of this heart. And then where it lays against those candies, I'm just going to use a single layer of the foam tape down at the bottom. So now it'll lay nice and flat. So let's go ahead and add these little corners of flowers. I'm just going to glue those down. And now we can add some of these little die cuts, these little butterflies. I've got 3 of them, so I'm going to position those. I'm curling up the wings a little bit with my fingers, so I'm just kind of curling the edges of the wings just to give those a little bit more dimension. And then I'm going to pop those up with a little bit of 3D foam tape. So once those are in place, I'm going to grab a couple more candies. And do keep in mind when you're making the candies, just make a whole bunch of them. And you can always set them aside for other projects. It's just fun to sit and create all these little candies. Now, from the Tim Holtz Ideology collection, I've got the label stickers. This one is called Sentiments. And you can see there's a few there that are kind of Valentine love related. So I'm going to grab that one that says All My Heart. And these are stickers, but I thought it needed a little bit more substance, so I'm going to stick it down onto some black 100-pound cardstock, and I'll do the same thing for this other one, and then I'm going to pop these up with some 3D foam tape. Next, we can add a few little metallic pearls. These are from Pink Fresh Studio, and these are just a really matte finish pearl. So it's really got that antique look that we're going for. I've placed those randomly all over the project, and I'm going to go ahead and glue those down. And I did add a little tiny one to the center of the bow. Now I've got this Distress Foundry wax. This is called Gilded, and this is a beautiful gold color. And if you haven't used this yet, what you want to do is shake it up really well, and then you just want to use a little bit at a time, because when it dries, it just turns to a powder. So you want to use just small amounts at a time. I'm using a little sponge dauber, but you could use your finger here as well. And then once you've placed it on, in order to get that really pretty shine and to get it to adhere to your project, you need to heat it with your heat tool. And that will give it that really pretty gilded look. So again, I'm going to add some more, so you can add as many layers of this as you want. And again, I'm just placing a little bit on my craft mat at a time, because it will dry to a powder if you don't use it right away. So I'm heat setting that, and I'm going to apply that gilding kind of all over, and you can see how beautiful that is. I love all the texture that it gives and that beautiful shine. Now I'm using that sponge dauber, and I do reuse that, so I'll take it to the sink when I'm done and make sure I rinse it off really well. And then I like to store it with the bottle so that I have it when I'm ready to go. So now again, you can see how pretty that is. And then I do want to add a little bit of that to the bow. Again, we're just adding layers here. So we added a little bit of ink to the bow, and now we're adding a little bit of that Foundry wax. We're just patting it on, and then we'll go ahead and heat set that. Now I've got some Mica flakes from the Tim Holtz Distress collection, and I've got some multi-medium matte glue, and I'm going to just apply some of these Mica flakes to the corners. I thought it needed a little bit more of a sparkle. So what I decided to do here was just use a flat edge or angled edge brush and just kind of tuck a bunch of glue down into the corners. And I'm going to do that on the top left-hand corner. And then I'm going to use that spoon again just to put some of those Mica flakes down in there, and then you can kind of press that in place with your finger. I'm going to let this sit and dry, and then I'll just tap away that extra mica. So here you can see I'm just loading it up with some glue in the corners, and then I'll just place that mica in there. I'll just press it down with my fingers. And then once that was dry, I went ahead and I just have a piece of scrap paper here. I'm going to flip that over and just tap away any excess. And I can put that excess back into the container and use that again. So let's take a closer look at the finished project, and you can see that beautiful Foundry wax in the gilded color. And then we've got those Mica flakes and these gorgeous chocolates. I just think these are fantastic. And keep in mind, you could just make a simple card with these. So just make some extras, make some cards. You could just use the candies alone without the box, so you've got a lot of options with this, and they're really fun to make. And I'm going to place this on a little stand and use it as a little decor item. You could certainly tie it with a ribbon at the top and hang that on the wall. So I really hope you enjoyed today's project. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you all a happy Valentine's Day. Take care. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.